In the world of diesel engines, there are a few names which are synonymous with incredibly reliable engines with equally strong cult followings. Think something like the 6.6-liter Duramax, International DT466, Detroit Diesel 60 Series, 3406 Cat, and so on. You get the point, there's a lot of good diesel engines out there. But one of the engines that we haven't discussed on this channel is the Cummins 6CT, and by that name you might think that it's related to the Cummins 6BT, or the 12-valve or 24-valve, however you want to refer to it. And while they share a similar name, they really don't actually share that much in common, although the 6CT is kind of like the big brother to the 6BT. And while it's a great engine, just like just about any other Cummins engines from this time frame, it's not absolutely perfect, so today we're going to look at everything wrong with the Cummins 6CT. And to preface this, we should cover what the 6CT is, what it's about, the applications it was in, some basic specs, just so you're up to speed before we get into the problems with it. Starting with the basics, we should clarify that like the 6BT, the 6CT is really one engine in a family of engines, including the 6C, 6CT, and 6CTA. Across the board though, these engines are incredibly similar, with the only notable differences coming in the injection systems, turbocharger, and running gear, as well as some minor internal changes. And to really understand this engine, we need to rewind the clock to 1985, which is when Cummins first introduced the original C-Series engines. But it wasn't until 1998 that we saw the ISC versions of these engines, which brought a whole bunch of changes and innovation to the market. In terms of specs, all C-Series engines are very similar, with an inline 6-cylinder design for improved reliability and simplicity, a displacement of 506.5 cubic inches or 8.3 liters, thanks to a bore and stroke of 5.31 inches by 4.49 inches. The block is constructed from heavy and strong cast iron, as is the cylinder head. Of course, with any large displacement engine with a fully cast iron construction, things start to get heavy. Like really heavy. More specifically, this engine is around 1,600 pounds dry, and when you add fluids, it gets quite a bit heavier too. Keep in mind, the weight changes depending on the engine variant and the application, but you get the idea. It's a heavy-ass engine. The upside of using an inline-6 configuration with cast iron materials is that it's a very strong engine, allowing it to output anywhere from 240 to 400 horsepower and 670 up to 1,075 pound-feet of torque. On the surface, it's much like any other medium-duty engine from this time frame, which is quite fitting considering the applications of buses, motorhomes, fire trucks, garbage trucks, marine, farm equipment, so on. You get the point. Original variants of the C-Series Cummins 8.3 liter are known as the 6C 8.3. These earlier variants share the same basic design and construction with the later ISC 8.3 liter engines, but the earlier engines were fully mechanical and quite a bit simpler. If you're deep into diesel engines, you might notice at this point in the video that the 6C 8.3 and the 12-valve Cummins from the exact same time frame are both fully mechanically injected and then later on replaced with their ISC variants, which brought in electronic fuel injection. Of course, Cummins made other changes and updates for the ISC version of the 8.3 liter, including a new variable geometry turbocharger for improved power output and engine response, and the addition of common rail fuel injection in 2004, which further improved performance and reduced emissions output. As always, diehard diesel fans are going to live and die by the fully mechanical engines, but it's hard to deny the performance and the reduced emissions output of the ISC engines. I think it's also worth noting the similar nomenclature between the B-Series and C-Series engines with the respective ISB and ISC updates. Another fantastic feature found on this engine is the mid-stop cylinder liners. And you might be wondering why they added these, and it's simply to improve ease of rebuilds, which in turn makes the engine cheaper to keep running for longer. Other updates to the 8.3 ISC diesel include direct piston cooling, crankcase breather, and roller cams. There's more updates to list for the ISC variants, but I think you get the point. They're on the same base, but the newer engine features a lot of innovations for improved power and reduced emissions output. With all that in mind, we can now look at the problems with this engine, and to be frank, there aren't actually that many. The biggest and the most catastrophic issue we see with these engines occurs almost exclusively in combines. As to why exactly this issue occurs in combines and pretty much no other application for this engine, it's not exactly clear, but there are some probable causes. The problem seems to occur anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 running hours on the engine, when we see a large hole in the side of the cylinder block. Of course, the hole doesn't just appear there randomly or by magic, but rather is caused by a connecting rod exploding out the side of the block. A connecting rod failure like this can almost always be traced back to some sort of lack of lubrication on the connecting rod bearings, but again, it's not clear as to why this is happening on the combines and not any other application for this engine. Part of this could be caused by combines simply having higher hours and more use than any other application, but it could also be traced back to the combine engines having overheating issues, which could then lead to oil temperatures getting high, and that could eventually lead to bearing failure later down the line. On the bright side, you think that because this engine is the big brother to the 5.9, that it might suffer from the same dreaded killer dowel pin issue that we've covered in depth in other videos. But that's actually not the case. In fact, the 8.3 Cummins is completely void of that dowel pin. It just flat out does not have that dowel pin, so there's zero KDP issues at all in this motor. Something which is a non-mechanical problem, but still considered something wrong with this engine, is the weight. And as we mentioned earlier, it's already heavy when dry, but once you add fluids, the running gear, and everything needed to get it to run, you're looking at an engine that's nearly 2,000 pounds. As compared to comparable engines from the same time, so a medium duty engine from the 90s, something like a Cat 3126 or an International DT466, the Cummins 8.3 is significantly heavier than both of them. In a medium duty application, that's not that terrible, as the frame, the suspension, and everything around the engine is built with a heavy engine in mind. But that does mean the 8.3 Cummins is a pretty bad candidate for swapping into a non-medium duty application like a pickup truck. It can be done, and it has been done, and people will continue to do it. But the point is, it's a super heavy engine that's really not well suited for pretty much anything other than a medium duty application. In terms of injection system issues, this is where the earlier fully mechanical engines really shine with their P-pump. But we won't go into details about how the P-pump injection system works in this video, as we've covered that in other videos. But for those of you who are wondering, the 8.3 and the 5.9 P-pumps are similar, but they cannot be swapped around. So you can't put an 8.3 P-pump on a 5.9 and vice versa, at least not easily, or it would be a ton of work to do it because of where the port for the lubrication is located. In 1998, they switched to the Cummins accumulator pump system, also known as CAPS. Functionally, this is a lot like the VP44 pump found on the smaller 5.9 liter Cummins, which also means it suffers from nearly the exact same issues with lift pump failure and fuel filtration issues. Now, obviously, this CAP system is not fully mechanical like the earlier injection systems, which means that there has to be a computer to control the whole thing, to monitor the whole thing and manage it. And that's where we find even more issues. For the ECM, the big problem is that it's mounted directly to the cylinder block. That means that it is subject to a lot of vibration and a lot of heat, which ultimately can cause the ECM to fail and your injection system to ultimately fail as well. Combine the issues with a CAPS injection system, so lift pump failure, fuel filtration issues, and the possibility of the ECM having issues controlling the injection system from it getting too hot or vibrating a bunch, and you end up with an injection system that is not only hard to diagnose, but really, really expensive to fix. Combine all that even further with the fact that the 8.3 liter Cummins was produced in pretty tiny numbers compared to the 5.9 liter Cummins, and you see where this might be a problem. Not only is the injection system hard to diagnose correctly, but the parts are much harder to find and much more expensive compared to the smaller 5.9 liter. It is worth noting, as I mentioned earlier in the video, that in 2004, Cummins introduced common rail fuel injection to the 8.3, just as they did with the 5.9 in the same year. One of the big upsides of the 8.3 Cummins is that it uses a wet sleeve design, which means that you can very easily remove the cylinder sleeve entirely for an engine rebuild, where something like the 5.9 liter Cummins is a sleeveless engine, which means that cylinder damage requires boring over and using larger pistons to match. The wet sleeve design works by using an O-ring on the outside of the sleeve right about in the middle of the sleeve, which separates the coolant side from the oil side of the sleeve. But all this means that you can and will see tiny amounts of vibration in the piston and sleeve combo, as it's not fixed in the block like a sleeveless design. Under the right conditions, this might not be a problem. But for the 8.3 liter Cummins, it can lead to major issues in the form of cavitation, which will slowly eat through the cylinder liner. This occurs when microbubbles are formed on the coolant side of the sleeve due to shock and vibration of ignition in the cylinder. Because those bubbles are caused by vacuum, when the bubbles break, it will take a small amount of the liner with it. This generally almost only occurs on engines with wet sleeve cylinder liners, so it's not too surprising to see it here on the 8.3 liter Cummins, and that's not to say that it doesn't happen on dry sleeve cylinder liners or sleeveless engines, but it is something to note that it's most common on wet sleeve engines, and over time it can cause massive issues on the 8.3 liter, but there are coolant additives to help band-aid the issue. But that being said, outside the issues that we just mentioned, there's really not much else wrong with the 8.3 liter Cummins, and that's a good thing. That's something that you love to see, and it's something that's honestly not too surprising out of a 1990s Cummins product. Sure, it's heavy as hell, but it's pretty dang reliable, it's easy to rebuild, the P-pump models are easy to tune and get more power out of, And for applications like motorhomes and buses, you're more likely to see the vehicle break down and fall apart well before the engine fails. For medium-duty applications, it's a pretty solid engine with decent power output compared to comparable engines from other companies like Cat and International. But because of its crazy heavy weight, it's a pretty bad candidate for anything other than a medium-duty application, so it's probably not something you'd love to swap into your pickup truck. The design of the 8.3-liter Cummins does make rebuilding it very easy and very cost-effective thanks to the wet sleeve design. But that brings concerns of its own with cavitation, although as I mentioned, that can be band-aided with the correct coolant additives and maintenance schedule. Unfortunately though, in the world of farming, this engine is not nearly as loved. As I mentioned, the engines in the combines, the 8.3s in the combines, are well known for blowing out connecting rods out the side of the block between 6,000 and 8,000 running hours. All in though, I'd say it's a pretty good engine. It has very minimal issues. It's perfect for specific applications. It's not great at everything, but it's great at that one type of application. And I'd say it's a pretty good engine. If you think there's anything I missed or anything you want to add in this video, be sure to drop it down in the comments below. Be sure to also let me know what videos you want to see in the future down there. Smash the thumbs up button if you enjoyed it. Get subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos. Check us out on Instagram and TikTok. Check out some of the other stuff on the channel while you're at it. I'll see you guys in the next one.